Of course, this week we saw the tragedy in Washington, D.C. occur where two young people of Jewish heritage were murdered in the streets of Washington, D.C. outside the Israeli embassy. And these sort of things should not be going on whatsoever, needless to say. Joining me this time is political consultant and Zionist activist Dave Crystal. Dave, welcome to our show. Now, I understand that you wrote a white paper on how Israel could how to actually win in Gaza, and that white paper which you wrote made its way all the way up to the Israeli Security Cabinet.
Analysis.
Yeah. So what is the premises of the white paper? Can you tell us the backdrop?
Absolutely. First, Rick, thanks for having me. And like you, my heart goes out to the families of Yaron and Sarah. It's a tremendous tragedy. And if nothing else, it's a reminder that we need more and better Holocaust education, and not just Holocaust education, education on the long history of Jewish suffering in America. As Ron Dermer poignantly noted in a speech he gave here in Florida, which I attended, the Holocaust is like the sun that blots out the stars. In other words, because of the Holocaust, students don't learn about the Spanish Inquisition and the pogroms and the Crusades and the massacre of York and the massacre at Alexandria. And the first Holocaust at the hands of the Romans, which is why we're in this mess to begin with, because we were expelled from our homeland about 2,000 years ago. So I think it's important above everything else that what we glean from these tragedies is the need for more and better education on the long-term suffering, the millennia of suffering of Jewish people, not just the Holocaust. With that said, to answer your question, yes, like many Jews, after October 7th, I was depressed and despondent, and had, I guess, what you would call survivor's guilt. You see these pictures of all these beautiful Jews, raped, tortured, murdered, just as worthy of life as I am. Why do I get to live? Very similar to what Jews experienced during and after the Holocaust. And in a situation like that, one asks, what can one do? What can one contribute? Unbeknownst to my family, I've never actually told them, I actually called the Jewish agency and tried to volunteer for the IDF. And the first question the lady asked me was, do you have any formal military experience? And I told her, well, I did the Gaza program for 2 weeks in Israel when I was a kid, but no, I don't have any formal military training. And the short of it all is that she said, well, it doesn't really make sense for the IDF to take you in because the basic training is 2 to 3 months, and we're going to likely win the war in 2 to 3 months. The war will be over. It doesn't make sense for them. Of course, famous last words, 2 to 3 months later, not only had we not won the war, but we were mired in both a diplomatic / legal as well as military quagmire. So I thought they won't let me fight, they won't let me put on a uniform and drag boxes from point A to point B. I am a political consultant. I'm 5-1 as a political consultant. I'm a published author and writer. Let me write a plan. Let me help intellectually. Let me see if I could draft a plan using my chess playing skills and my political consultancy that could at least be better than what we see in the offing. And so I drafted the plan, which I think you read on JFeed, and I'm happy to go into detail about it. But essentially, if you could sum up Israel's political existence and military existence over the last 20 years, it's a succession of tactical successes under the rubric of strategic failure. In other words, Israel has not had a cohesive strategy. And because Israel has not had a cohesive strategy that melds diplomatic and PR strategy with military tactics and strategy, we're in a situation where war that we should have won in 3 months is nowhere near finished 18 months plus later. But I'm happy to go into details in terms of the plan.
So, and that is what made it to the Israeli Security Cabinet, is that your premise that things aren't intertwined enough, and this work could have been done in 3 months.
I can't drop names. I might have inadvertently just now. But let's say between my political consultancy and the fact I'm a former candidate for mayor of Miami Beach, and I know certain people know certain people, between a variety of different permutations of connections, I got my plan pretty much read by everyone except maybe Netanyahu. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Operation Gideon's Chariots very, very closely resembles stage 1 of my plan. I hope to God they implement that as soon as possible.
I think that surprises a lot of our viewers, a lot of Americans, to hear that the Israeli plan is not intertwined the way it should be, because we have so much respect, I think, over here for how Israel goes about its military defense.
Well, the IDF should get most of the credit. Unfortunately, certain elements of the political echelon like to take credit, but the IDF is a tremendously talented force. Our soldiers are the bravest young men and women imaginable. And again, we've demonstrated a lot of tactical achievements, such as the pagers blowing up, the
Yeah,
walkie-talkies blowing
yeah.
up. But at the end of the day, we still have an entire generation of young Jews who are now young adults who've been raised to think it's normal to run into a bomb shelter on a regular basis, at least twice a month, now twice a week. So we need a cohesive strategic change, a paradigm shift in terms of Israeli security. And my plan hopefully will set the premise for that.
What has Israel done wrong strategically in its war with Hamas, besides what you've mentioned, if anything?
Sure. Well, the largest element is the PR/diplomatic element. This is not the first time the IDF has had its hands tied behind its back due to socio-political and diplomatic reasons. So basically, the short of it all is that the anti-Zionist/anti-Semites, especially in European capitals, spread blood libels about Israel, about the Jews, about the IDF. The social and political and legal pressure thereof becomes so strong that the Israeli political echelon ties the hands of the IDF behind their back, thereby making them more insecure, thereby leading directly to the deaths of soldiers who otherwise would have lived and not died. So Israel needs to invest much more in what we call Hasbara, PR. This has been an ongoing problem for generations. It's particularly a problem as it pertains to the October 7th, post-October 7th war. So for example, what Netanyahu should have done in the week following October 7th is lay the table. Because Israel did not properly diplomatically and politically lay the table, we're in the situation we're in terms of all these free Palestine nuts falsely accusing us of genocide.
When you say lay the table, what do you mean?
Sure. In terms of rhetoric. So let me explain. So Israel and the world knew that Gaza was one of the most densely populated areas in the world. In any war, there's a crossfire. In any war, civilians get killed. That's true of every war, okay? That was going to be all the time, particularly true of any war in Gaza. What Netanyahu and others should have done is say, listen, look what the Russians did in Grozny. They leveled the place, okay? But that's the Russians, fine. Look what the United States of America did in Mosul. They had a civilian to terrorist or civilian to combatant kill ratio of 7 or 8 to 1. We are now going to the most densely populated area in the world, one of them, okay? Because we're a moral Jewish army, we anticipate in having maybe a 4, maximum 5 to 1 kill ratio of civilians to combatants. If we were to lay that table, then when the truth comes out that our civilian to terrorist kill ratio is less than 2 to 1, we would have looked like moral geniuses. Instead, the anti-Semitic world say, look, the Jews are killing more civilians, 10,000 children. They're committing genocide. They're targeting civilians. They're targeting children. Laying the table politically yields fruit militarily directly.
Got it. All right. Yeah, well, Dave, it's a very important topic, obviously. It's a very detailed topic, and we appreciate you joining us in explaining what you have, and we look forward to having you come back and go deeper into the details here, because there's more to the story than that we can cover at the moment. And any final comments?
We just need better education. The tragedy you saw is a result of just lack of education on the historic suffering of the Jews and lack of education as to the political and social construct that is the Palestinian identity. There were no Palestinians so-called 200 years ago. Ask anyone to name the most famous so-called Palestinian in the year 1850, they can't. It's a socially constructed identity, politically constructed identity, constructed in the 1950s specifically to write the Jews out of their own history.
Wow.
So we as a society need to learn more about the truth of Jewish history and learn more about the social construct that is so-called Palestinian history.
Wow. David Crystal, political consultant. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.